looks like we're all here. So we will start with roll call. I'll go, Steve Bjork is not in attendance tonight, so I'll go right to Jen Bryson, yes. MJ Burns,
Yes.
Jesse Fennelly,
Yes.
Joan Newhouse,
Yes.
David Ragsdale,
Yes.
Jay Samaha.
Yes.
Excellent. Item number 2 is the vote on 2019-2020 school calendar adjustment for April vacation, remote learning plan options. Dr. Brand.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for your flexibility in being here this evening. As you will recall, we had a discussion at our last meeting around entertaining other options to deviate from what currently is scheduled to be the April break for next week. That was planned, as you recall, part of your actions last year to have voted and approved the calendar. It typically does include April break. This is a point of conversation amongst pretty much, from what I can tell, most every district throughout the Commonwealth in terms of considering other options, given the closure that we've had and given where we were at relative to remote learning. I can tell you, for what it's worth, that I think if you were to poll a variety of other districts around us, you'd find the majority of districts seem to be shifting towards remote learning continuing for all or a portion of the April vacation next week. There are some districts that are choosing to hold to their calendar and still take the days as April vacation. Based upon our discussion last time, you'll recall that the committee had requested that I reach out to our community to gather input and perspective from our parents and guardians, and we did that. We had an overwhelming response of 1,074 responses to the survey that was sent out pretty quickly. And members of the committee, you have that in your folder. You can see the numbers there, but I think you would agree that overwhelmingly, at 61% or 656 respondents indicated a desire to continue remote learning throughout the course of next week. So it would be my recommendation to you to consider altering the school calendar and to follow what it seems to be very clear from our stakeholders, both our staff as well as our parents and guardians, to continue remote learning next week. I will just point out and remind everyone that Monday is a state holiday, and so that cannot be part of the discussion of consideration here. But the other 4 days, Tuesday through Friday, most definitely can be. And one final point, just to remind you of, is that if we were to convert or transition, if you will, those days to remote learning, they are considered school days, and thus they do get applied to the 180 regulatory days that we have to comply with. And so the implication of that is that for each day that we continue to engage in remote learning next week, that would let me see how I can say that. That would result in us ending earlier than what we are currently scheduled right now, which is June 19th. So with all of that said, I'm happy to take any questions or seeking any clarity.
Mrs. Burns.
And this may be premature in the discussion, but there's been some rhetoric around, I haven't been able to confirm it or not, with the state moving the Boston Marathon to September 14th. Some people seem to think that is going to be another state holiday. And considering we're talking about the calendar, I didn't know, I know it doesn't pretty much touch base as to where we are now with what is before us, but that's just something I'd like to touch upon with you on to Dr. Brand. But as I've said previously, I think it is my opinion that I think we should continue with remote learning next week. As to whether the board wants to make a hybrid, which a couple of districts have done so, I would recommend. I think it's essential for the momentum in which all the work and the investment that the staff and the central administration office has done to get our students and our staff up and running with remote learning. I just think it would be a handicap to our students and although no one has a crystal ball, I do think it unlikely that we'll be back in school um, by the beginning of May, especially with the new projections that have come out. So I guess that's a two-part. One's a question, one's a statement.
I can respond to the first, and I don't know this definitively, but my understanding, I guess, two things. One, regardless of the fact that the Boston Marathon is not occurring as scheduled next Monday, that does not change the status of the state holiday.
Right.
And number two, and this is only through conversation with my colleagues or counterparts, if you will, as well as with the commissioner, it is expected that at some point, I'm not sure when or how quickly, but at some point the governor will be providing guidance on what would sound to be like some sort of holiday, some sort of state day in September, in accordance or in alignment with the Boston Marathon. So if that were to be the case, if that were to become a state holiday or whatever the terminology would be, we would certainly have to revisit the 2021 calendar, but we wouldn't have to do that, at this point.
All right, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Fennelly?
Thank you. I'll start by saying I appreciate the survey, how quickly it was done, and certainly how many responses we got. I think it was eye-opening. I know I went into the discussion last week or whenever it was with sort of mixed feelings, and so having some folks respond was helpful to me.
Sure.
I know you've alluded to, Dr. Brand, a sense that some of the faculty would prefer to continue. Do you have any idea around what the percentage is, or I mean, is it just kind of an aggregate? Most folks think we should keep. I'm just curious how many of the teachers might be upset if we were to continue with remote learning rather than honoring April vacation next week.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't have that exact number at my fingertips. Maybe one of my colleagues can pull that up, but it was the majority of staff who, in my conversation with Ms. Fiddler, the president of the WTA, they also surveyed the staff, and it was a majority of staff who clearly indicated a desire to continue remote learning. I'm just on that point. I'm sorry I don't have the exact number. Brian or Paul, sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but one of you have that handy at all?
And I just emailed you the email that you sent out.
I think it was on the 60%.
Glenn, 59%.
Thank you. Yes, right.
I thought I had seen it somewhere, but I wasn't certain. So yeah. Thank you, guys.
And that was reflective of 186 members. So 313 members, at least at the time that the results were shared with me. 313 members have completed the survey, and of that 313, 186, 59% had indicated a desire to work through the April break.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments or discussion? Mr. Ragsdale?
So at the last meeting when we discussed this, one of the concerns that I had brought up, and this is also something that that Mr. Bjork was speaking of as well, is whether by taking these days next week as school days, we would then lose them as potentially in-person days in June if we were going to get back into school. Having thought about this for a little while, I think that both, it just seems increasingly unlikely that we will. And then also that while that might be in the abstract a loss to have lost the in-person days, but there would be another loss if we, something that I think that a lot of the communication that the committee received and that I received additionally is about momentum. This idea that we're just kind of getting started and have really kind of, gotten now into the remote learning plan and are building momentum as people kind of learn that routine. And that taking 4 days off next week would be a loss of momentum in the learning plan, and I think that is has weighs with me more than the concern about losing potential in-person instructional days, which we at this point may well not have. I still am concerned about, I don't like that school ending on a Monday on the 15th. And so I think that we should still consider doing the hybrid schedule where in addition to Patriots Day, we take one additional day. It seems like it would either be not Thursday, excuse me, Tuesday or Friday as a potential day, so that we still retain some momentum that week. 3 of the 5 days we're still doing remote learning. There is a nod towards having the vacation week. There's at least one extra day beyond Patriots Day, but then also the school year ends on a Tuesday, which seems to me much better than a Monday. I'd like to see what other people think about that.
Mrs. Newhouse.
I'm for keeping learning next week because I think it's important to keep the momentum going and some consistency for these kids who have been, I think everyone's striving for some kind of consistency here. But one thing that I saw today, not to throw another wrench into the discussion, was that I believe it was North Reading is looking at maybe potentially shortening a few other weeks throughout this remote learning, making them more like 4-day weeks, so they can have that those additional days that last week of school as well. That could be a potential option, but ending on a Monday, I agree, could be hard. But I am for keeping us continuing learning next week.
Great, thank you. Mr. Samaha?
I'm in favor as well of keeping it, as working through the vacation. I think between what the parents said and what the teachers have said, seems pretty overwhelming that that's sort of what they want. I don't really see the huge problem in ending school on a Monday. I know some people might have, clearly have different opinions on it. I don't think it really matters too much if it's a Monday or Tuesday, because from what I have been, reading and listening to, I don't necessarily think we're going to be going back anyway. So I don't know what the huge deal is with ending on a Monday. And even if we have a day off, from my own experience, teaching, I'm still working on Saturdays and Sundays and all those other times as well, because it's all about email and all this other stuff when you're doing it. So even if we were to take that day off, it's still not really a day off. So I say we just keep going right through.
Yeah, I initially thought maybe the hybrid would make some sense, but seeing as one that wasn't actually a very popular option, so I think we should look at the survey results and really honor that from the parents and the teachers, but also this idea that my son actually has a Zoom, his Zooms happen to be on Friday. And so I don't know if we remove the Friday or some people have Zooms on Tuesdays. And so I don't know if, although they may seem insignificant changes to us, it might pose more of a difficulty for teachers and families. So I think maybe keeping it as consistent as we can at this time probably makes good sense. And again, the survey results are pretty clear that moving ahead with the 4-day week was the preferred model. So any other discussion, Mr. Ragsdale?
Just adding a tiny bit of data on top of that. MASC has been keeping a running list of what decisions districts have made, and the hybrid right now is the least popular of those options. They have 11 districts listed as taking some sort of hybrid break. 29 is taking their full regular April vacation week, and 76, definitely a very strong majority, planning to work through the April vacation. I think that I also think that hearing Mr. Samaha talk about the Monday, it is less of a problem with the remote learning than when you're thinking about opening up the entire building for one day if we're in school then, which we might be, but no one's counting on that at this point. So I think I'd be all right with working through the week as well. I do want to say something about the difficulty of childcare, of ending school early. One of the things that we also discussed at the last meeting that I still want to acknowledge is that the earlier that we end school, the harder it is for families to find childcare in camps towards in June, which typically don't start until the end of June. But I think that that's going to be a major issue no matter what, even if we continued our regular schedule and ended on the 19th. I mean, originally, one of my daughters was scheduled to do a camp the week after school ended, and first the camp just basically said, no, we're not doing that week, and then they canceled the entire summer. They're not even meeting at all for the summer, and so I think that that is going to be an issue no matter what, whenever we ended, and that we have to do our best to I think keep going where we are, and try to make sure that the remote learning that we do have now is as effective as we can make it.
May I just respond to
Sure.
that?
Mrs. Burns, yeah, go ahead.
Regarding the piece around the summer programming and CARES, since we last met, I did follow up with Ms. Parker, who, as you know, oversees our CARES program. And this holds true not just for CARES, but I mean, obviously in a very different way for the child care piece, Mr. Ragsdale, but our summer sports camps, we have summer programming for special education and related services. So all of these three fall into this domain of our efforts will be around centering us to start our planning as if school will be able to, or as if programs will be able to run in the summer. We can't wait until there's any kind of final decision, perhaps by the governor, I suppose it would be, in terms of what the ability for schools to run any kind of summer programs, if you will, would be. In my conversation there with Ms. Parker relative to CARES program, she's working behind the scenes to put into place a plan that would, my understanding, have CARES programs open up the week of June the 22nd. So there's still, to your point, would be a bit of a gap for those families that do utilize CARES for childcare, if you will. But just for the opportunity to share with the committee and the community that we working behind the scenes is going to start as if we will have the option to hold summer program. That obviously will be decided upon by a higher authority than any of us in terms of what that actually looks like, however.
Thank you. Mrs. Burns.
I've been thinking for the past week your concerns, Mr. Axdale, with regards to that. And I have to say, I think moving on, the ramifications of what we're currently involved in, I don't think we're going to resume our routines as quickly as that. I think childcare will be an issue as the workforce, if we're fortunate enough, starts returning. But I think the pandemic has created such new avenues for remote work that there may be some avenues for parents to continue to work remotely. I'm not saying that it's going to work for every parent, but I do think that getting back to our routine is not going to be as quick as that. I know that there's been a lot of discussion that moving too quickly can risk us for a resurge of this virus, which we certainly don't want to do, because I think everybody wants to get back to normalcy quickly. And I think the ramifications we're going to feel are going to be over the next several months. So I do have one quick question for Dr. Brand with regards to, by finishing on June 15th, are there any contingency plans with regards to if we aren't able to get back into the classroom for the year, or if there are still restrictions with regards to social distancing and the number of people in one area? Do we have any contingency plans for childcare and CARES should the first option not be viable?
Sorry, just to clarify, the first option meaning?
I mean that, do we have any, like we're hoping you're setting up everything as if we are to go, that we're going to operate, but I think with regards to like the childcare piece with CARES, are there, I mean.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah, so it's only been a brief conversation, to be fair, an email exchange with Sherry, but they are starting to consider, I guess, some various options and what perhaps, if there was directives given, for example, any programming could only take place outside and couldn't be in a building. I mean, and this is all speculation, unless there's some guidance out there that we're unaware of right now. So I call those contingency plans, I suppose, but it's still very much in the early stages. But I think it's fair to say that planning is beginning, and in as much as of what information there is right now, we'll certainly work with that. But one has to believe that there will be additional guidance that will be coming around summer programming. And maybe just a final point on this, I was on a call with the Commissioner of Education yesterday, and in fact, one of the participants did raise this very thing with a plea that the commissioner could convey to the governor to be thinking about sooner than later, if it's possible, summer programming. You know, I'm sure he's got an awful lot on his plate, but to the degree that districts like ours and these conversations we're having, summer is going to be upon us really quickly. And so any kind of additional guidance beyond just the school year for May and June, the plea was hopefully he can provide some guidance for us all sooner than later. So hopefully that would be the case.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ragsdale.
Just one more quick thing, which is that the surveys that we took of both the staff and the community were, are very helpful. And, as we said, about 60% of both are in favor of converting next week into a full school week. But one thing that I think is worth pointing out about any kind of survey results like this is that it only captures people's preferences. You give them options and they say what they prefer, but it doesn't capture how strongly they feel about them, or potentially what inconvenience the different options might place in front of different families. And that's something that I think is always worth bearing in mind, that it's more than just what people prefer. You also have to think about, what are the consequences and what are the potential sacrifices that people whose preferred option is not chosen have to go through when we're making these decisions.
Thank you. And Dr. Brand, just to be clear, you are advocating for the 4 days.
Yes, I am. It would be my recommendation for the committee to consider continuing with remote learning through April break, inclusive of Tuesday, the 21st of April, through until Friday, April the 23rd.
Okay. Ms. Newhouse?
Can I give a motion that we continue with remote learning for the 4 days next week, and that we end school on that Monday in June? What's it, the
15th?
15th.
Motion, is there a second? Mr.
I
Fenn?
will second that.
Thank you. Okay, so now we'll do roll call. Jen Bryson, yes. MJ Burns?
Yes.
Jesse Fennelly?
Yes.
Joe Newhouse?
Yes.
David Ragsdale?
Yes.
Jay Samaha?
Yes.
So that's unanimous. Thank you, everybody.
I will work to get this information out immediately following this the meeting tonight for both our staff and community. So,
Thank you, and thank you all for your good comments and discussion.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Number 3, we have paying special education tuition payments during the COVID-19 closure.
Thank you. Yes. So one additional item tonight, and this is reflective of some of the other things that you've seen before you, as we and all districts are grappling with some of these perhaps lesser thought to be important aspects, but they are important as we consider the business side of our operations. And so there is a brief memo from Mr. Ruggiero in your folder relative to special education tuition payments. And this is falling in line, by the way, of guidance from the Commissioner of Education as well too, regarding how it's recommended school districts deal with these different aspects. And one of these is special ed tuition payments for students from Wilmington who are attending schools out of district. Paul, would you like to add anything on this matter?
No, I think you had summed it up pretty well. Again, it's part of the guidance from on the desktop from the commissioner back in March 27th of 2020. Falls in line with the transportation that we voted in paying employees and so forth.
Mrs. Bryson?
Mrs. Burns?
I'm just want to make note for the record that I will abstain from any conversation and vote surrounding this. I think it could pose a conflict of interest.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions or discussion? Seeing none, would someone like to read the recommended motion? Do you have it, Mr. Ragsdale? Oh, you're on mute.
Video.
I'd like to make a motion to approve special education tuition payments for private and collaborative schools, as well as day and residential special education programs to maintain essential system capacity and continuity of services during the school closure period, unless otherwise required by law.
Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Samaha. Any discussion? Seeing none. Jen Bryson, yes. Jesse Fennelly?
Yes.
Joe Newhouse? Did she say yes? Yes.
Yes.
David Ragsdale?
Yes.
Jay Samaha?
Yes.
MJ Burns, abstain?
Abstain. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Dixie, do you have that?
Yes, I do.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, so our last item is adjournment. Would someone like to make a motion? Thank you, Mrs. Burns. Is there a second? Mr. Samaha? Roll call. Jen Bryson, yes. MJ Burns?
Yes.
Jesse Fennelly?
Yes.
Joe Newhouse?
Yes.
David Ragsdale?
Yes.
Jay Samaha?
Yes.
All right, thanks everybody.
Great.